Okay, if we can come back to order. Okay. If we can come back to order, please. Thank you for your attention and participation earlier. Now we're going to go back into the rest of the program, and I'll defer to the city manager as we move forward for the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are now live, and I want to turn it over to Adam Bond. Adam has courageously led this effort. And so, Adam, you want to start this off, and we'll kind of roll through the plan as you guys have hard copies on this one. So what I would ask, please, when we start this, we're going to pass out note cards. And so that we make sure that we can get through the plan and get through it efficiently, please write your questions down on cards. The reason for that is a lot of these goals dovetail with one another. And so where you may think you've got a question up front, that may get answered in the next step. So rather than chunking this up a little bit, when we start this, we'll pass out some cards and just, if you would, make some notes, and we'll collect them, and that way we can efficiently answer those questions.
Thanks, Steve. Good evening, governing body, Mr. Mayor. We're excited to give this presentation tonight. As Steve has talked about, a lot of work has gone into this, and we're really excited about the strategies that we have to achieve the outcomes that were provided to us by the governing body. So just kind of giving a general overview of the process. As you know, governing body met, gave the general guidance on the different outcomes that our staff should work and try to accomplish. I do want to touch on this slide about the budget and kind of the how this plays into our staff kind of procedures going forward. So the budget is coming up, and so this will play a very essential function in how we develop the budget, developing our city services around each of the three strategies and outcomes that were developed, so we can better illustrate how we as a staff are responding to the needs of the community. We additionally plan to do quarterly evaluations where we look at the data, we look at the progress that's been made, and the end document that we make of this strategic plan is something that will not be static. It'll be something that we'll be continually looking at and adjusting and working towards these goals. So to go over the goals again, or the outcomes, I should say. So the three outcomes that were established by the governing body were housing, community appearance, and growth. And furthermore, they were defined as housing to increase overall housing inventory equitably and to elevate the current housing stock. For community appearance, to improve the appearance of the capital city of Kansas. For growth, increase the number of people who live and work in Topeka. So in addition to these three outcomes for our community that we are working towards, staff was also directed to highlight everything that we do and all the strategies that we come up with under the lens of these four guiding principles. So innovation, sustainability, equity, and municipal operations. Before staff dove into specific strategies, we thought it would be important to define what each of these means. So to go over that, innovation, we defined as a dedication to the art of collaborative creativity combined with critical analysis to deliver intentional positive transformations to meet the evolving needs of our community. So again, all of these definitions were kind of workshopped by staff. We had a robust discussion talking about things that we needed to include and the intention behind each of these. So sustainability, a responsible stewardship of resources to balance the needs of the present while ensuring Topeka's prosperous future. Equity, provide fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all. Understanding that not everyone starts from the same place, we must acknowledge, identify, and eliminate barriers to foster civic participation, belonging, and promote just outcomes. And finally, municipal operations, a commitment to our citizens, partners, and colleagues to be knowledgeable, fair, consistent, and responsive in every interaction to provide accessible, quality service, striving for excellence in all we do. So as we develop the strategies to accomplish these three outcomes, we looked through the lens of each of these four guiding principles. So as we go through our presentation tonight, we'll call out some specifics, but you'll also hear these as kind of the underpin of what these strategies are built upon. One example that kind of came up in the group was talking about a commitment by the city to provide timely, meaningful access to programs and services for individuals with limited ability to read, write, speak, or understand English. So we thought this was something that through everything that we do, we want to make sure that we are providing that access, providing different opportunities for people to be able to understand what we are providing and how they can access that. So one of the first things that staff did was, how do we measure our progress? So again, I mentioned that we'll look at this at a quarterly basis to kind of assess how we're doing and to continue to work towards that. And so what staff developed was 3 different indicators for each of the groups of different things that we'll be looking at to measure whether or not we're making progress. So we will take these and further find the exact measurements that we'll use to be able to come up with that. So for example, in growth, we have economic growth. So we'll look at a couple different factors and kind of come up with a way that we can measure economic growth. So be looking for that in the future. We'll create a dashboard and that type of thing so we can continually monitor our progress. So a lot of the strategies that we'll have, you'll see this specific action or goal to implement some of the findings from the Harvard Bloomberg studies. So again, this is the economic development as long as the homeless initiative that is starting here soon. So we thought it would be appropriate for Rhiannon to give an update on what has gone on so far with the Harvard Bloomberg work that's been going on with staff. So, Rhiannon.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Good evening. Rhiannon Friedman with the Planning and Development Department. Super excited to share something that I've really immersed myself in since the start here with the city. It's been about 4 months now that we've been engaged in the Harvard Bloomberg innovation process. So please keep in mind that I'm learning this as I'm going through it. So I'm going to be doing a lot of reading, but I'll try to keep it engaging and interesting. All right, so for a quick overview of the process. So I think visually the best way to realize this is I'll let you have an overview of the boxes, but realize that this is everything that we have worked on so far has been phase 1, the understanding phase. So the innovation track was created for cities to think outside of the box and generate solutions to problems in their community. So we're currently into 4 months of a 7.5-month program that we'll be working through, and we'll continue to apply the Harvard Bloomberg framework to new and existing problems by working collaboratively with the community to promote equitable, inclusive approaches to problem solving. All right, so I'm going to go through each of these bulleted and show you some of the documented photographs of the experiences that we've had. It's been a lot of Post-it notes and idea sharing, and it's been a lot of fun along the way. So learning sessions with Harvard Bloomberg. So the first thing that we did is we broke out our initial problem framing strategy. So we have a core team, which is made up of 12 staff members across 9 different departments in the city. That group of individuals, I've been a part of meeting with them probably weekly, almost, and throughout these first 4 months. So we've spent a lot of time together, what we would call falling in love with the problem. We also have 6 auxiliary members who've helped partake in all of our in-person phase 1 understanding sessions to help us add new perspectives along the way, so we don't group think too much. It's nice to bring in their perspectives and let them see what we've accomplished along the way. So during the initial problem framing process, you'll see that the first part of this is we had to create a project focus, right? So what we initially decided was the focus of our project was to accelerate commercial and residential development by creating a proactive environment with accessible, consistent, efficient, and equitable systems that foster partnerships to allow the Topeka community to thrive in a way that increases the vibrancy of the city, increases the tax base of the city, and improves the life of all citizens. So once we created the project focus statement, we started to work on mapping out our stakeholders. So that's where you'll see some of the colorful Post-it notes come along. This was our stakeholder mapping project, which was more challenging than you thought, right? Our whole goal with this is to make sure that we are being inclusive and thinking holistically of the community and everybody that this problem may impact or touch along the way. So after we formed our community statement and then we broke out what our stakeholder groups were, we decided that it was time to move into our community interviews. So you'll see here, this is broken into 3 columns. So we broke into groups of 3. Group 1 was working with developers, Group 2 worked with city staff, and Group 3 worked with business owners. We worked our way through 4-week research sprints. So during these 4 weeks, our team engaged with 32 unique individuals in interviews that included small, minority, women-owned business owners, developers that were local, regional alike. We also completed 17 literature reviews and 9 observation reviews of various meetings that happened publicly that touch and center around the problem that we were trying to solve. So you can imagine that with that many community interviews, we received quite a bit of feedback, right? So the best way that we were able to work through this was utilizing the Harvard process and taking our information and theming it, right? So we spent a lot of time trying to draw through lines to the feedback to figure out how to group it together so we could start to tackle some of the issues and understand what the true problem is. I think a lot of this experience we learned that we had an idea of maybe what we thought the problem was from what we hear from, in passing, but what we realized when interviewing people that there was a lot more through lines, and we were able to understand a little bit better what we could be doing differently and what the true problem was. So once we themed all of our information together, it became time to reframe the problem statement. So our reframe problem statement was really brought out of stakeholder feedback that we received, and it gave insight on how we could go about reframing our problem to ensure that it captures the root of the issues that we heard during the interview process. So currently, our reframe problem statement is, the focus of our project is to increase investment in commercial and residential development by creating a proactive environment with aligned systems and communication strategies that are efficient, equitable, and strengthen partnerships, improving the vibrancy and the tax base of Topeka. So I will say one of the things I think I realized when I know I just read really long statements to you as our original statement and our reframed, but I think that the spirit of our problem statement is the same. I think what we were able to do was narrow it down and make it a little more concise, making it more achievable. So we feel really good about where we've ended up with our problem statement. So through the research, we uncovered key learnings about how the problem is felt in our community, and then the following key insight statements capture the most valuable learnings. So we were able to group feedback into insight statements, and these were some of the takeaways. So our first insight statement was, make incentive opportunities more visible and cohesive in the Topeka community. So the thought behind this was that diverse incentive and programs really and truly do exist today, but they're managed by various independent organizations. And sometimes that means that there's not a cohesive strategy and communications plan. So the thought here is that this could cause programs to be underutilized, maybe leading to the perception that other communities have more to offer. So how do we do a better job of trying to bring together all the opportunities and putting them underneath one umbrella? The second one is streamline Topeka's development process. So the direct impact of this process, complexity, and often the timeline delays that come in tow is a negative hit to financial feasibility and reduced return on investment for projects pursued. So we're constantly hearing about the development process and how it can be complicated. So what we're really trying to do is figure out how do we work with developers and small business owners who might be experiencing different issues with the development process, and figure out how we can work with them to make improvements to make it a little more equitable and more efficient and effective. The third insight is to cultivate a sense of greater belonging in the Topeka community. So the feedback that we received is that the lack of residential pride for the community and the perception that the city is unattractive in ways can result in people choosing other communities to establish their roots that provide a greater sense of belonging. So really digging in deep here to understand how we create that sense of belonging and do better to tell our story, right? To engage our citizens more, and as we're talking about population growth, certainly trying to maintain the population that we have here today by making sure we talk about all the great offerings that we have here. Number 4 is invest in workforce diversity in Topeka. So this was both in terms of industry and career pathways through those industries. And 5, being deep in the commitment to the collaboration in our development process. So from large to small to minority to majority businesses, this will help create a more equitable environment around development process in Topeka. So now that we've created our key insight statements, the next steps will be what we phrase as the how might we questions. So this has been a lot of fun to get to brainstorm, and so far we're at the point where we've done it internally with our core and auxiliary team of just asking ourselves to think outside of the box. One of the things that we do is visualize you're in a world that's in outer space, right? How might you solve this problem if there were no limitations or if you were in a different environment? So it just really opens up the space for creativity and innovative ideas to come through. So once we get through this process, the goal here is to frame the key insights as an opportunity, and this will take our team to the end of phase 1, which is the understanding phase, and into the second phase of the path to innovation, which is generate. So what you'll see in the generate phase is that's when we'll move into the ideation, the co-design workshops with citizens. So right now we are working through formulating those groups and getting interviews scheduled. So some of these folks will be people that we interviewed originally, and some of them will be bringing in maybe members that we missed or that we didn't get to connect with the first go around, and bringing our key insight statements to them and asking them to help us with the how might we's. What ideas do they have? And then we'll go through and prioritize ideas, and then we'll start prototyping ideas and solutions and then testing them out. So that will take us through the end, but as you can see, we still have half of the program to go and lots more to learn.
Great, thank you, Rhiannon. So as you can see, a lot of work, a lot of time has gone into that process, and it fits a lot with a lot of the different outcomes that we have. So you'll see that throughout, and so we thought that providing that context would be important as we continue on. So we'll collect your first round of questions just so we can start organizing them. And while we'll do that, we'll go ahead and start with the housing group. So staff that was involved in the housing group, you'll see is made up of a team of staff from a wide variety of departments and different levels of that department. And so we're very excited about the progress they've made, and we'll turn it over.
All right, good evening. My name is Carrie Higgins. I am with Housing Services, and tonight we are going to talk about the priority outcome housing with 2 focus areas: how to elevate our current housing and how to increase our housing stock equitably. So we have come up with 3 strategies that we think will make the biggest impact. The first is education and activation. The second is the Bloomberg-Harvard program implementation. And the third is policy and ordinance consistency. So I'm going to share with you the first strategy tonight, which is education and activation. And we have 3 goals. The first goal is to increase awareness of our programs, resources, incentives that we have. We have a lot of really great programs that people don't necessarily know about. Some examples might be the Equity Access Shelter Program, the Emergency Repair Program, our Rural Housing Incentive District, the Neighborhood Revitalization Program. So the goal here is to increase the marketing in a variety of different ways so that we are reaching all socioeconomic levels schools and making sure that we're spreading the awareness of these programs that are available. And it's not only critical that we get the information out there about these programs that are already here, but it's also would be an easy win for us because it is something that we could do right away and that would not take a lot of city resources to do. Our second goal would be to prioritize accessibility and support the program usage. So it's not enough for someone to know about a resource if they aren't able to access and use that program. So this one, a great example would be the Housing Navigator program. If an individual has a code violation, they are connected with a navigator who will not only give them information about what resources are available, but that navigator will also help them access the program and walk them through that process if they need that level of assistance. So our goal would be to expand that navigator position to different city programs so that we're ensuring that everyone has access to the programs that are available. And then it is also important that we are creating a culture that is inclusive and inviting so that individuals feel comfortable reaching out and accessing those programs if they need it. And then our third goal is to increase training partnerships to help reintegrate individuals into the workforce. And this will not only help support skilled trades, but it will also, those skilled trades are needed to develop housing. An example of this one might be to partnership with Washburn Tech and their AOK program, or partner with other organizations so that we can tap into some of those unused resources. And Kristen is going to share our second strategy.
Thank you. My name is Kristen Moorhead. I work within the city manager's office. I was told jokingly that I lurk, so now that you can put a face and name to the person who's lurking behind Steve. Our next proposed strategy for the housing initiative is to implement the recommendations from the Harvard Bloomberg study. And so I know that might sound simple, but for us that was very critical. As you heard tonight, our staff has been working since November specifically to accelerate the economic and residential development within the city. And with valuing collaboration, it was important for us to work alongside these staff members, many of which are here tonight and have been throughout the entire strategic planning process. Ultimately, we wanted to support their efforts and to not restrict, duplicate, or confine them. And so these recommendations should be brought to us by August.
All right, I'm Alan Stahl. I'm the fire marshal for the city of Topeka, and I'm going to talk about our last section, which is policy and ordinance consistency. Our first goal is to have consistent and thorough application of building and property codes and related activities. Our action steps on that is to develop and deliver frequent training programs to ensure consistent knowledge in government, industry, and citizens of building codes and property codes. The next is to build an environment of innovation by regularly reevaluating incentive policies, comparing them to peer cities by leveraging a culture of continuous improvement. This will help us to ensure we provide the best incentives possible. Finally, transparency is the cornerstone of accessibility. During the Harvard Bloomberg research, it has been identified that we need to establish clear expectations and boundaries regarding the roles of employees, governing body, and citizens. The second goal is to complete the implementation of the Changing of Our Culture of Property Maintenance initiative. Our first recommended action step is to finalize the initiative development and move to implementation of all sections. The second recommended action step is to move from a reactionary to a proactive stance, increasing staffing and property maintenance. Our final objective is we know that camping by the unsheltered is a relevant and timely issue which needs immediate attention. This brings us to the third goal, which is to develop consistent accountability to city ordinance with regard to camping. For cities, the legal environment is rapidly changing regarding camping by the unsheltered. We recognize any movement involving this issue requires balancing risk. We must embrace and implement innovative strategies to make good decisions addressing this issue. And we must accept there will be unintended consequences from our actions. The second action step is the city should reevaluate penalties for bad actors with regard to perpetually vacant properties. By making progressive penalties, it could drive behavior change resulting in more occupied buildings. This brings us to the last action step for this goal. Camping and squatting on private property adds an additional layer of complexity to policies. To address this recommendations, the city should work to identify the ownership of vacant properties and lots so that owners or their representatives can be easily contacted by staff. As we move on, it's a reminder we are not standing for questions, but please write down your questions on the provided note cards. And I will now turn it over to the next speaker, who is addressing the attractiveness of the city. Who's next, or the next group?
Yeah.
I want to stand. All right. My name's Sylvia Davis. I'm with Utilities, and I got to work with these fabulous people here on our team, focusing on the original outcome of, well, let me state it this way. So we focus on improving community appearance. Originally, we know that the outcome statement read, establish material design and material portfolio to ensure consistent and quality aesthetics and investment in all parts of the capital city of Kansas. Then fairly apply code enforcement to address blight and bad actors. We took a step back and reframe the statement to improve the appearance of the capital city of Kansas, just to take a more holistic approach to developing specific strategies. After that, we developed many different strategies, narrowing our efforts to two main areas of emphasis. The first is the reduction of blight in the city of Topeka. So the first strategy that you'll hear about developed from a focus on our unsheltered communities and efforts we can take to address the impact they may be having on our desired outcome. So you're probably going to hear a little bit of duplication here, but with a focus on how these folks or this faction of our community is impacting the desired outcome. The second strategy we'll discuss brings attention to enhancing the appearance of our community through expansion of and connectivity through our neighborhoods, along with addressing bad actors through improved code enforcement approaches.
Thank you, Sylvia. I'm Gretchen Spiker with Communications, and as Sylvia mentioned, one of our strategies to move the needle on community appearance is to reduce the number of people who are experiencing homelessness. Many in the community have recently expressed concerns about blight, trash, and the overall appearance of the capital city. We acknowledge homelessness involves many complex factors, including mental health challenges, addiction, socioeconomic disparities, and a lack of a community consensus on how to effectively reach long-term sustainable solutions. We plan to improve community appearance by reducing the number of people who are experiencing homelessness, by getting more people housed through expanding and seeking sustainable funding for programs like Equity Access Shelter and Impact Avenues. Additionally, we desire to increase awareness of our existing resources. We also recognize there is a gap in service for those who are homeless that could be addressed by a low-barrier shelter.
I'm Rochelle Matthews with the Finance Department. Another goal we focused on to improve our community appearance is to increase the amount of blight remediation efforts in the unsheltered homeless camps through expanded removal of trash and review of existing policies like the camping ordinance previously mentioned to ensure that we're addressing community needs and desires. We've seen that our initial efforts with expanded trash collection options are showing positive results, and we feel that there's room for additional accessibility options and expansion. Our third goal is to increase homeless prevention efforts. We want to achieve proactive community solutions that address the root causes of homelessness by developing and recruiting more partners to assist with homeless prevention. We feel that we can improve and adequately staff existing programs like Shelter Plus Care. Our fourth goal is to support the process of the Housing Innovation Track team previously mentioned before,
We recognize that that community-wide process is planned and starting to be implemented, and our team is dedicated to support the actions and thoughts and plans that come out of that specific team. We specifically chose these action steps as the result of council and community outcry. We have existing successful programs that can be capitalized on. These efforts are going to be measurable, sustainable, and leave room for innovation and collaboration.
Can we forward the slide? There we go. Good evening, everybody. My name is John Chardine with Property Maintenance. Our next goal would be to reduce the number of code compliance cases, and what I'm really talking about here is identifying our bad actors. We know we have them, so let's change their behavior. Let's improve the education of our occupants, and what I mean by that, let's continue, if we want to move the needle on this, if we want to raise the expectation of our occupants, let's educate them. Let's let them know what's accessible, not accessible, what's acceptable and what's not. Secondly, let's increase the staffing for inspections and abatements. If you increase the staffing, we reduce the number of hours, we abate property, we start putting our inspectors in houses in our housing inventory. We start to raise the level of expectations. Thirdly, let's review the accessibility of various programs. Let's assure that we have adequate access for our applicants to acquire possible qualifying programs such as Shelter Plus, Rapid Rehousing, and other programs associated with EAS. Our second goal was to work with partners to enhance community appearance. And what I mean by this is this is important. It's like the elephant in the room. We can't do this by ourselves. So let's get everybody involved. Let's identify and promote community cleanup days and green space initiatives. Let's work alongside our residents, volunteer groups, by organizing the cleanup days and addressing public places such as parks and walking trails. Let's continue by partnering with community organizations for blight removal. Let's work with partners and landfills to create large item trash-free days. This could include tires, furniture, everything you see on the side of the road that just upsets you every time you drive by. Let's work with private partner and owners to enhance appearance to our entry corridors. Let's emphasize, it's time to put the boots on the ground. Let's emphasize to these landowners that volunteer compliance is a lot cheaper than forced compliance.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brad Demers. I'm with the City Manager's Office. Our third goal to enhance community appearance is to improve the neighborhood health assessment scores. For some historical context, since 2000, the Planning and Development Service Department has evaluated the health of our city's neighborhoods using 5 indicators. Those are poverty, public safety, average residential property value, homeowner tenure, and boarded houses. To improve the scores and overall health, our first action step is to execute the existing neighborhood plans. There are currently 18 neighborhood plans that call for specific actions that will help us move the needle with the health of our neighborhoods. Our second action step is to provide assistance to better activate neighborhoods and maintain engagement. We recognize that we can't do this alone, and that we believe providing more equitable assistance will increase and maintain engagement among neighborhoods. Our fourth goal to enhance appearance is to improve connectivity within and between neighborhoods. To accomplish this, we will take 3 action steps. First, we will improve infrastructure to promote safety and connectivity. Second, we will construct sidewalks and shared use paths. And third, we will improve pavement conditions throughout the city. By focusing on these actions, we will connect neighborhoods, link people to services, improve mobility and safety, and thus improve the appearance of our neighborhoods. On behalf of the group, we want to thank you for the opportunity to present these ideas.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Freddie Maugin. I'm the City of Topeka Chief Financial Officer. I'm a member of group number 3 with the focus of growing the City of Topeka. Prior to the presentation, I would like the opportunity for all my colleagues to introduce themselves, to show the level of diversity that we have within our group.
Rhiannon Friedman, Planning and Development.
Jackie Russell, Human Resources.
Brian Wheelis with the Police Department.
Jana Horton, Topeka Police Department.
Josh McInerney, Public Works.
And we definitely had to break it up because I'm Hannah Yulberg back with Finance. So we do have a little bit of duplication within our group. So first focusing on growth. The other strategies that the teams have talked about definitely play a role in making this effective. We know that our overall arching goal of growth, as described by the City Council initiatives, are multifaceted and are going to take more than just focusing on development alone. But specifically, because we know that this is a supporting component of the overall strategy, we did focus on 2 ultimate primary areas. One, resource alignment, and the second is to promote and foster development. These 2 areas rose to the top based on the feedback that we received through multiple engagements, the Bloomberg, as Rhiannon had spoke to earlier, as well as feedback by other constituents that while we have resources, they're hard to find, sometimes hard to navigate, and often create a barrier of entry into our community. So with resource alignment to start, there are many different resources that we know our community currently has available. The problem between our workforce development, economic incentives for both new businesses as well as development is that often they can be spread out across different organizations and too thin to make a material impact in any one area of focus. For this, in supporting cross-functional organization alignment, the creation of a toolkit is our first action area to focus on. This toolkit allows us to all speak the same language when discussing potential incentives to be provided for business development or new growth, as well as other tangibles such as workforce development and areas of focus as we want to break through different industries. This toolkit not only can provide this common language, but it can also provide a comprehensive list of current incentives as well as expected future potentials. We know this list ever changes, as we're currently experiencing with RHID incentives, to help our community understand what's out there and make sure that we're leveraging it in a strategic way. In addition to providing this list, we can also create a consistent rubric for measurement. So when we talk about, is this investment good for our community? What does that actually mean? To a business owner, that may mean one thing. To a school, that may mean another. So how can we provide a consistent means by which we can evaluate potential investment into the community and also provide a potential expectation of what that return on that investment would be? Creating this shared evaluation criteria would not only aid in the discussions and evaluation of potential incentives, but it also would help create a centralized database for us to be able to, as staff, bring forth to this committee, governing body, how did the incentives do? Did they meet our expectations? Can we track the effectiveness of this so that we move forward and understand the impacts to both our own tax base as well as future opportunities for it's been a long day, our city. This also helps support us in evaluating the future impacts to the tax base, specifically as relates to the city of Topeka. As we know, incentive packages roll on and off the books on a regular basis. Throughout focusing on these 10 different action steps as listed in your PowerPoint, and creating the foundational language by which we can all cross-functionally communicate with one another, we can then focus on creating a proactive environment that is accessible, consistent, and equitable to then promote and foster development within our community, which leads us to our second focus area. This one we know is significantly important, and as many in this room have received feedback from the private industry and different constituents around the city, we want to become a city of choice for both entrepreneurs as well as developers. In order to do this, we need to take a proactive approach to make sure that we are addressing the needs of this community effectively and efficiently as we can. But without having a baseline established to know how we are gauging in this, we have nothing to go against to measure our actual results and successes. So our first focus area on this area is to create a baseline. We will leverage the Net Promoter Survey framework, as we've seen success in other organizations throughout the city, to collect that stakeholder engagement and to create a simple measure of how well we are doing. What is our perception amongst our stakeholders to give us one data point that we can then show measurable movement against. In addition to establishing a baseline, the next would be to create a on-demand guide. So we've talked a lot about making things accessible, meeting people where they are, whether that is a different language, it's going to them, it's reaching out to a community that has otherwise been underserved. How do we create a guide and a resource that is open to all and that is comprehensive enough to really help people who haven't maybe navigated our system or our processes make it through. Another way that we plan to promote development within our 8 action steps here is to take a proactive approach by identifying key development lots. This would help us target so that we can monitor better with infill, as well as current market demand needs to help incentivize certain areas that we know our community is currently lacking or has targeted growth towards. The combination of these different 8 action items will support the city overall in taking our proactive approach that reduces our project timeline from concept to completion, as well as keeping the customer at the center of the process, really centering it back on what does the community need from us so that they can help promote and thrive in the investment.
So, Mr. Mayor, we will go around the room and collect some additional questions, trying to work through some of the questions that have already been asked. In regards to the topic on the Harvard Bloomberg EcoDevo set, one of the questions was asked, as far as community interviews and developers, city staff and business owners, did we miss out on private citizens and consumers? Is this going to be addressed in the next phase of ideation and co-design? The answer to that is yes. So a lot of the conversations early on was trying to understand the current lay of the land. The way the ideation phase works, it does involve all aspects. In fact, one of the specific tabs that we looked at was historically under-considered individuals. So making sure that we're getting voices throughout the community, voices that aren't normally heard when you're talking about economic development. So there's a significant amount of work to be done. In fact, I think we're doing 3 ideation sessions, and those will take place in 2 weeks. Second week of April. Irma, you want to stand up real quick? So Irma Fadoa in the back is our housing navigator. And so one of the questions was asked, where is she housed, in which department? She's currently in the property maintenance unit department, but she physically sits between housing and PMU. And that's done by design because she has to work with both departments. So, Irma?
Could you explain, I think I kind of get what a housing navigator is, but I don't know for certain. Would you mind explaining that?
So she's basically, and you guys can jump in here, is an advocate. So if I've got an issue, we're trying to get to solutions so that we're not going to court. If I've got a problem, here's a resource, and she's a problem solver. Yep. Councilwomen, do you want to expand on that any? These 2 particular, just because of the Karen Black deal.
I think what we were seeing with the Karen Black study when she came in and evaluated, processes is that there was at times a fair amount of people getting caught in the system that should not have been because of being so low income or lacking in resources. And at times those were the individuals that were being summoned to court with no money, elderly, etc. And we hear a lot in community when people get written up, well, I don't know how to access this, I don't know how to access that. So in starting to frame it all in a more proactive approach with the housing navigator, she or he stays on top of it before it gets to that point where it goes to court. And this is, to me, it's beneficial in so many areas, but it's beneficial in letting the public know that we are more on top of what we're doing in code compliance and property maintenance, and that we are helping citizens, especially underserved populations, find the answers, but also weed out, as John Chardine said, the bad actors, because this will help us keep an eye on that, as the people that shouldn't even be in the situations that they are, they're going to be weeded out. And I think that the bad actors are going to be more readily seen.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So one of the questions asked was, how will you objectively measure on a quarterly basis community parents and growth? On the screen in front of you is the scorecard that we anticipate rolling out. Behind each one of these colored tabs is hard data. So for example, surveys, pavement condition indexes, census, economic trends. So there are 4, 5, 6 different data points that feed into each of those tabs. It's simplified to this extent because if I give you 47 different measurements, that's really hard to read. If we group them into sets, then I think we can measure on a quarterly basis. The groups that you saw present will actually pull together on a quarterly basis so that A, they stay engaged, we keep the buy-in of the strategic plan, but also so that they can truly analyze objectively what's going on. So as you engage input from the community, how do you identify and select participants? Everybody that's been up front has been involved with trying to identify folks throughout the community. And like I said, we have specifically gone into different groups to try to get us to think, are there representatives that should be engaged, so that we're hopefully getting a larger group of input from the community than what might traditionally be heard. Are the code officers cross-trained between housing and nuisance? That's an absolute yes. One of the things that we were asked in regards to housing programs, and so there's also a similar question on the economic development side, any considerations of activating what we currently have. There's a lot of talk throughout the process about highlighting what's already in place. We know, for example, the neighborhood revitalization program. We've shared that with public groups, and you kind of get a blank stare back because they're not familiar with that program. So we know we already have things in place. We need to do a better job of making those programs accessible, as well as making sure that people know that they're out there. How about the redevelopment of Central and East Topeka, where we have large areas of vacant lots with primary infrastructure already in place? That's one of the things we're talking about, where we think that the land bank can, if approved by the governing body next month, we think that that can have, will be an asset to that. And then when we look at the neighborhood revitalization program and potentially funding that a little bit better and making that exposed a little bit better, we think that'll have an impact. What will be the future relationship between the city and the Greater Topeka Partnership? Any changes? You know, we've been working hard with GTP on this, and we see those relationships as continuing to grow and strengthen. And we're already talking about additional areas for collaboration. A lot of the focus throughout this process has been collaboration and making sure that we're engaging other community partners. In no way can the city do these things by themselves. It's going to take groups from all over to make this happen. And so GTP specific, but collaboration throughout. Are we looking at similar cities that are growing and investigating what they're doing and making a plan to integrate those into Topeka? Yes, that's part of what we've been doing through this, is doing a lot of research, having a lot of conversations. There's more of that to come. Certainly GTP has established a few communities that we can use as part of the Momentum 2027 competitive assessment.
City Manager?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I piggyback with a question
Yes,
off
ma'am.
of that?
Yes, ma'am.
Are any of the conversations that you're having when you're looking at comparable cities, knowing that we have a high percentage of folks that are renting, folks that are housing cost burden, and I do believe some of this has to do with there's no living wage. Is discussions going on about a living wage that other cities have that we haven't dipped into that realm yet?
I wouldn't say that we've talked about living wages specific to this. As far as communities that are experiencing some of the same issues, absolutely yes.
And I would just wonder why we have not, since it stands out in our housing study of what the living wage, and that was back in 2019, and it was a little under $17 an hour.
So I think what I would tell you is that we've tried to focus really on 2 to 3 to 4 areas that we can truly make an impact and get a win. There are literally dozens of ideas that have been thrown out in all 3 of these major goals. You know, the task that we had for these teams was where can we have the impact? These aren't one-year wins. These are 2, 3, 4, 5-year wins. And so does the city itself have the ability to have a significant voice and impact on the living wages? I'm not sure that as that went through it that we felt that was one of the things that we could truly affect. And then really you want to talk about?
Sure. City Manager handed me this question. How will proposed legislative bills affect plans on the vacant housing? There is a bill at the Capitol that would preempt requiring a fee for a vacant housing registry. It started out as a complete preemption on registries at all. That would have had significant impacts to the Karen Black recommendations to more aggressively use a vacant housing registry. That passed through the House with significant amendments. While other cities don't always realize why we went neutral, part of that was because we needed a registry altogether. But it made it through the Senate committee. It was not run on the floor today or tomorrow, or yesterday and today, sorry, forgetting what day it is. Hopefully it will not be ran tomorrow and that bill will just go away, but I guess we'll find out. But the bills in its current form, even if passed, would allow us to still have a registry. We would just have to think about more creative ways to convince people to use it.
We've got about 5 questions in regards to the homelessness situation. And I think a common thread is, do we think that we can have an impact? And I guess I would say, yes, I hope so. There is this homeless initiative that we've talked about and have sought approval for in regards to having a consultant come in. Yes, I am very hopeful that we can have an impact. We're also going into it with the realization that we don't have the solutions up front. And we're purposely leaving minds and ideas open. So the process that Rhiannon ran through in regards to the EcoDevo side, that is the identical process that we will run through on the homelessness side. There are lots of ideas out there. There are ideas that work in some communities and don't work in others. Just because it's been tried in Lawrence and didn't work doesn't mean that it wouldn't work in Topeka or vice versa. So there is a summit next Wednesday, and right now we have about 36 agencies from around the city that all touch homelessness in one way or the other that have agreed to participate. The intent of that summit is to truly map out what's being offered as far as services in the city currently, trying to identify where there may be gaps, and hopefully coming out of that with a little bit of an understanding what role does city government play and where can we engage best. After those conversations, we will form a team that will be comprised of folks throughout the field. And that team will be about the same 12 folks that we talked about with EcoDevo, except it will be a combination of internal and external. A team that would be looking at mental health is a different team that would be looking at nutrition or at housing or at workforce redevelopment. And so we're purposely not naming those folks at this point in time until we decide where is it best for the city to engage. A specific question was, what is the definition of low barrier as it relates to housing the unsheltered, and are there existing locations? Topeka does not have a low barrier shelter. What we have would be a medium barrier level to where there are requirements for participation. So that's the Topeka Rescue Mission. That is different than a shelter that is basically has no restrictions. And one very specific example as to where those would be different is drug usage. So if you are a substance abuser, you are not welcome currently into TRM. The rationale behind that one is the folks that are residents there, that are guests there, are trying to get clean. And so you don't bring an active user into an environment where somebody's trying to get better. That doesn't work well. And so that's why there's a difference between a low barrier shelter and a medium barrier shelter. That is one of those things that's been identified as being a gap in the city of Topeka.
City Manager?
Yes, ma'am.
I would also ask, is there any way that the council can receive any kind of information on harm reduction? Because that, to me, goes kind of hand in hand with what would be a low barrier shelter. I mean, harm reduction has been a tool that's been used since like the 90s, if not before that. And so, I mean, when you talk about a low barrier shelter, and it's not for us to go in it with the assumption that there's going to be all kinds of heavy drug use and all of that. I think that some of these harm reduction models are used in low barrier shelters. It's not like a free for all, because I don't want folks that are listening that have concerns about, needing another shelter. I mean, we have to educate ourselves as a governing body on what exactly all of these things would mean. And the other thing that I would ask is that, the meeting tomorrow night at CRC Lundgren, that some of these answers being given to people, but they need to tell their stories on what they've endured for several years with the encampments and the unsheltered mentally ill and all of that, but they also need to hear something affirming is going to be done. So that might be a good place to look for some of these people to interview on some of these committees that, are looking for average citizen folks. Thank you.
One specific question is, how can we afford trash removal at the price that has been spent on homeless camps? That's a great question, and I think that comes to why we're having some of these conversations. It is about how do we spend our resources? What is a priority? And so when the governing body says that the attractiveness of the capital city is important, that says that, to me, that there's a desire from the council to invest resources, whether it be manpower, whether it be financial, whether it be time, into improving that condition. Certainly we have, I think, collectively all expressed frustration with trash throughout the city. John Chardine certainly has done a lot of work in those areas. Tony Trower, Tony, where you at? Tony right now is coordinating blight crews so that we are going in and trying to pick up trash. It's not that we want to do that, but it's something that at this point in time, what I think we're hearing from the governing body is that's much a desire. And then one of the questions was, I think, how did you pick the teams? If I understand the question right, and it's really where we started for this specific exercise. We started with directors and deputy directors, and then what we started asking ourselves is, who are the subject matter experts? So when y'all came back to us and said, we wanted to tackle growth and housing and community attractiveness, we started asking, who are the right folks? Who do we have on staff that are boots on the ground? And that's why to me it was very important to show you these teams, to show you that it wasn't one person, it wasn't two people, it's this whole group behind me that was involved and will stay involved. That's important to us. And we've asked that they talk to their peers and they talk to their colleagues so that we're always staying real with the problems. We also spent some time with GTP, and specifically we're talking through Momentum 2027, in so much as when you think about the work that Freddie Maugin did with GTP on building indicators and building measurements, we're pulling that knowledge base in over here so that we're not reinventing the wheel. If GTP is already measuring something and it pertains to what is housing or community appearance or growth, we don't need to do something different. Let's talk a common language throughout our community. So that's kind of how those teams were put together. Gang, are we missing anything? Council members, additional questions? Yes, sir.
I just like to say I like the format that you picked here. Let us go, let you go through all the information, have the questions as we go along picked up, and then that way we can kind of just wrap it up kind of in one big bow like that. So I appreciate the way you did this tonight, so we could.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'm not trying to go out of order here. You normally run this, but I'm just kind of picking them as they come up, if that's okay. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say this is really, really impressive, and this is really, really exciting, and thank you all so, so much. This is fantastic work. I am so excited to be a part of this community and to be a part of this organization on, the part-time basis. But thank you so much. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I've sat through quite a few of these. You probably know that. I was telling my colleague, I don't know if he was listening, but I was telling him this is probably the most interesting one.
Thank you.
I look forward to moving forward and not having this discussion to say we did it, but to get organized and do it, if that makes sense.
Yes, ma'am.
I asked the question about how they were, the groups were chosen because, I seen a lot of enthusiastic people or staff come forward. Tony Trower, when he got up and he's excited and he's ready to go at it, and I'll just use them as an example, and some of the other ones that got up as well, that they're up there, they're proud, and I hope we keep that same enthusiastic spirit because it's a lot of hard work, but I know we can do it. I know if we get it to the court level, I know we have a judge that's capable, even though he voted no. My little old lady stoplight. We'll have that conversation. But I like that. I like how the chief had his little chest out, And then our new, I like that. Our police chief. I like that. I like the man and woman, the stalls that got up there, and they're willing to go. We don't have a lot of that, but that was awesome. So, and I would be remiss to talk about Sylvia Davis, who's pushed hard for a lot of years. All of you guys have, and I'm like Hannah. I want to say thank you, but let's just not let it sit. Let's continue to keep that in the back of our minds, what we want to do. Because I see a trashy Topeka right now, and I don't like that.
Councilwoman, I can tell you. Yes, ma'am. I can tell you that so tonight was really us making sure that hopefully we were going down the right path. So we got our marching orders, and I think part of a good communication is making sure that we're checking base to make sure that we actually listened. And that we're headed down the right way. And so I do, before we want to leave here, I guess I'm looking for some affirmation with that one. But I also wanted to say that we are treating this as not a one-time document that goes on a shelf. This truly is a living, breathing document that will be modified as we go along. And, we think we have some strategies in place that are the right ones to tackle. But when you look at the homeless side, those things change, and they change rapidly. And so we want to be nimble enough with this to where we can pivot as necessary. But again, this team is set to meet on a regular basis to ensure that we're keeping this at our forefront.
City Manager, I'm a yes. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
I don't know how close we are to wrapping up, but I want to make sure that I acknowledge your acceptance and effort in this, City Manager. I know when you and I talked initially about implementing this kind of approach to bring to the governing body and to staff to think differently about the problems that we've been working on. You were ready as well as the city attorney, to go and listen to this information, get a feel for where we could be if we utilize this in a proper way. And I think the people that you've chosen on the staff have all met up to your expectations as well. It reinforces our continued effort to acknowledge the professionalism of the city employees here that we have in Topeka. And my congratulations to everyone who has contributed here. And as you pointed out, Adam, you did an excellent job of organizing this and putting it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Did Tara Demick make it in by chance? So certainly you got a chance to see Patty Gentrup, and can't say enough about her help with this one. But I also wanted to point out one of Topeka's own, and that being Tara Demick. Tara helped a lot of these conversations and has facilitated hours with us. So I do want to call out her contributions also. So, other questions? Yes, sir. Deputy Mayor.
Are you sure you answered all of the questions that you were given?
Well, there was the one question as to why is Councilman Emerson not staying awake? So, yes, ma'am.
You'll have to tell us who we're supposed to talk to check in, but it's very encouraging to see those comments from the council at first and then the process.
Well, we certainly appreciate your investment into this. The governing body has spent a considerable amount of time with this one. You spent small groups, you did the half day, and then you're spending several hours tonight. So as staff, I can tell you that we greatly appreciate your investment in this, so thank you. Mr. Mayor, I don't see any other questions, so it's all yours.
Well, without further questions, and let's see, is Emerson awake?
Yeah, okay. He's on his phone.
All right, okay, he's on his phone. All right, good. Well, again, thank you for everyone in participating and giving your attention to this process. With no further business to come before this body, I adjourn this meeting.